This is episode 744 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. By that introduction, which included Wally in it this time, you may hear or may understand that we are not doing a traditional interview for this particular show. We are going to do something a little different. We occasionally do deep dives, Wally, on things. This time, we're going to do something deep on a different topic relating more to cultural aspects of New Mexico. We're going to focus on one particular blog post from a relatively high-profile individual about New Mexico. And then we are going to present our own views and opinions on said post. Yeah. And I think that will take us 40 plus minutes or so. So let me get some background here. This is from a man named Jeremy Hohola. That's Jojola. Now, Mr. Hohola worked at one time, probably a decade ago, I think, for KOB TV. I believe he is a native New Mexican, at least that's strongly implied, but he does work up in the Denver area, and that is a critical fact in this particular conversation. More importantly, in my view, is the fact that the Speaker of New Mexico's House of Representatives, he has wholeheartedly endorsed this statement on social media, which I believe is really kind of the factor here. And he basically said, "Louder for the people in the back," which is a online way of saying, yes, I wholeheartedly support this statement. Any thoughts on that, or anything you'd like to add, or that I may have stated inaccurately?
Yeah, Paul, I spend too much time online, and I didn't know. I'm glad for you clarified what that is. So we're going to see what Javier Martinez thinks he advocated and what he might really advocate. And just, this topic, this is a great lead in to one of the questions that many of us in New Mexico talk about is, why don't we do better?
Yeah.
And so and then the key is culture hurting our state, helping our state? And then I think more importantly, what's culture and what's just bad policy is the thing that hopefully will come out of our discussion today.
Yeah. And this is from August 26th, so it's a recent post. And if Mr. Hohola hears this, or Javier Martinez hears this, I would love to have either of you gentlemen on the show to discuss and more likely debate exactly what this all implies. But I'm going to start here, Wally, by simply reading this post. It's not very long, certainly not as long as the Holy Bible or any of the books in the Bible. It's
or a typical government regulation.
There you go. All right, so here we go. There's a story being shared that cites another study putting New Mexico at the bottom of a list when it comes to the best states to live in and quality of life. In reality, this study is done to garner attention and prompt social media discussion, so the company behind it gets free attention in articles that are designed to spur comments and angry responses. This is the economy of angertainment. Studies, quote unquote, like this, that put New Mexico at the bottom of a list pass through a capitalistic and corporate lens and disregard culture and heritage that makes places unique and beautiful. It dismisses history and long, systematic Western applications of what quality of life should be based on nuclear family standards. It has been said New Mexico is the land of mañana, and that trait is often seen as a negative factor. New Mexico should embrace this quality. We live for today. So what if things move slower? So what if people aren't up to the standards established by an article that is written for marketing motivations? American society is overworked, stressed, and constantly worried about if this week's paycheck will cover food, the rents slash mortgage. GoFundMe is the new healthcare. We spend more time in cubicles than with our families. Is this the standard we should strive for? Should we really invest our value in a cursory study by a company called Wallet Hub? Let's stop and smell the chili. I am proud of the land of manana, and if it scares people and makes them worried about moving to or living in New Mexico, so be it. People have been living in New Mexico for eons through constant change and have always been scoffed at by outsiders who don't understand that a deep blue sky, the smell of candles in a grandmother's home, or a dirt road are far more preferable than gridlock on a freeway or spreadsheet. Adobe walls last longer than white picket fences. New Mexico lasts only in that world. Now, before moving on, 577 kudos, likes, thumbs up. Now, I could list names of people who we all know. I will refrain from doing that because I quite frankly find this post to be not only troubling, but embarrassing. And I will spend the next 40 minutes with you pulling it apart. But yeah, I think this mentality, unfortunately, undergirds a lot of what holds New Mexico back. So,
Well, I think there's no question about that. And then, to start off with, Paul, as I said, who doesn't like the weather of New Mexico, the blue skies, the smell of chili roasting on a crisp fall afternoon? Our New Mexico cuisine, the red and green chili that are so ubiquitous in food in New Mexico. Family, all of those things. We love all those things. There's nobody that disagrees with any of those. Least of all, I think I do not disagree with any of those. But the things that Wallet Hub does, and they do a lot of studies that are all pretty good, by the way, that show us doing poorly. Those are things that impact families. So this is not, it's they say through a corporatist and capitalistic lens. Well, Wallet Hub does things on affordability, quality of government, and if not Wallet Hub has done it, lots of studies are done on quality of education, crime. All of these things are very important. And let's be clear, Paul, there are states that love Wallet Hub reports because they're always at the top of them. And
mhm.
so, just because we're at the bottom, I don't think that we need to say, oh, well, because we're at the bottom of everything that Wallet Hub says, we just need to disregard them because they don't understand what it's like in New Mexico. Well, I just think that's a kind of a silly position to take, but these seems like these two have taken it.
Yeah. And you were born here. I wasn't born here. Just to fully note that I had family ties here, dating to World War II. So I spent a fair amount of time here. I also appreciate the blue skies, wide open spaces, the outdoor amenities, especially golf courses, which there are many nice ones around. I can tell you, as I did on that particular program, that my children were a bit taken aback by the tall buildings in New York City. If you want to talk about a place that has all of the hustle and bustle and all the things that Mr. Hohola seems to take as criticism. So that being said, this is going to be on the nose, but uh, Wallet Hub does a report on the most stressed states. Interestingly enough,
And where do we rank on that?
so before I get to that,
That's interesting.
factors include work-related stress, finances, and family life, with New Mexico experiencing high crime rates and divorce rates contributing to its top position in the country. So I will start this by saying that I believe that Mr. Hohola is incorrect on its face. The entire premise of what he's saying is wrong because in many ways, New Mexico families are stressed. I will add, obviously, crime is a huge one. Worst education system in the entire nation is another. The lack of job opportunities, the fact that so many of our kids, we found recently that between 2020 and 2024, using Census Bureau data, the youth of New Mexico, 0 to 18, left. We saw a bigger decline than any state except for Illinois. Uh, so there are many, many reasons. I sat in traffic this morning. In Albuquerque, at least, there are plenty of ways that you can sit in traffic. It is the reality of many places. Obviously, Dallas and Houston and some of these very fast growing, very, very big cities have greater traffic problems. New York, you get to sit on a tube underground, and that has its own joys and problems.
Without air conditioning.
And I would only say that every state has its challenges and its positives. And if you're happy with the way New Mexico is as it stands now, that's probably because you have a well-paying job. You're able to afford to live in an area that has decent schools, or you have a decent school available to you, presumably in a rural community, or you're able to afford private schools, or you don't have children at all, which certainly alleviates a lot of the pressure off of you. But there are a lot of people concerned about the failing schools and the opportunities or lack thereof that their children have into the future. So, first, so let me say that. So that's one thing. I really have an issue through the capitalist and corporate lens. What do you take to mean in terms of capitalist and corporate lens? Because obviously we know New Mexico's economy is very government oriented. Is that better? Is that what we're all just supposed to sit back and believe that the federal government and oil and gas, and that's something that will not make its way into this. Oh, everything's spectacular. Well, as long as the oil and gas is just down in the southeast, where those people can deal with it and produce all the money that we need to at least maintain some semblance of a modern lifestyle.
Well, it strikes me as it's kind of that kinder socialism, that idealized socialism that never exists, except in the minds of academics. But I don't know what they meant. We are a capitalist society, thank goodness, because those that aren't certainly don't do very well for very long. Uh, but here's the other thing I would say about that statement about through that lens. Let's just say that for a second that this that Wallet Hub kind of is viewed by those that are in the business world that are looking to maybe relocate their businesses, or where would be a good place for my business to grow, and that it is a total corporate kind of a take, what Wallet Hub is. I would submit, Paul's a little thought experiment. What would New Mexico be like if instead of 50th in all the goods and first in all the bads, we were right in the middle? We were 25th in everything. Would that make us more attractive for business? I think it would make us hugely more attractive for business. But I also think it would make us hugely more beneficial for families. Yeah. Probably disproportionately so, even compared to businesses. And so I think it's just missing the boat on, what is the role of things that are being measured, why those are really not only important to business, but hugely important to families.
Yeah. And of course, families, yes, extended families, part of New Mexico. I certainly, believe that is more of the case on, in Native communities, a lot of the Hispano communities as well.
Yeah, particularly in northern New Mexico.
Yeah. And there's nothing about inherent in capitalism. In fact, I would argue that if New Mexico had a more economic a diversified economy, and more opportunities, because with the young people leaving the state of New Mexico, they are obviously uh, tending to leave their families behind in many cases. Sometimes the entire family chooses to move and they all give up all of these glorious attributes that Hohola speaks of. But when you are forced to leave New Mexico to find a better opportunity, that is not exactly in support of this family unit and the opportunities. It also can increase your stress levels because suddenly you're out on your own. You're on an island, so to speak, living in Dallas or Phoenix or somewhere where there's not uh, grandma, grandpa, mom, and dad to help with child rearing and all those kinds of things. Uh, I actually think that a lot of aspects of traditional New Mexico life would be helped if people like, and my critique here is ultimately focused at Javier Martinez and his mentality and the mentality of the people who share this view. And ultimately, what we're talking about is absolving Javier Martinez and his ilk in the legislature and in the governor's mansion, because I believe that Michelle Lujan Grisham shares this viewpoint, broadly speaking, that they are absolved from doing anything positive for New Mexico, and instead we just get by. We're like a beautiful young woman who uh, has no brains in her head whatsoever and makes bad decisions constantly, but we are beautiful, and that is not going to ultimately work out to our favor in the long term, and it's not. It is clearly not. Otherwise, people would not be leaving our state at such high levels, and that includes a lot of people who value the same things that Hohola is referring to here.
Yeah, Paul. And then I've watched a couple of videos and read a few stories about places that are fantastic from a tourist point of view that are not very pleasant to live in. And I do believe that that is kind of the trap that, say, well, we have all this wonderful stuff. It's like, absolutely, we have all this wonderful stuff. But let's face it, there are people that uh, tourism still does pretty well in New York City and Chicago. And if you live on the south side of Chicago, you're probably not feeling like you're living in the best place of the world. Whereas if you're going to a Cub game at Wrigley Field and going and driving along Lakeshore Avenue, you're probably pretty happy as a tourist. And so that's the other thing. It's like it's this kind of fairy tale notion of what New Mexico is, as opposed to a real place. And that's the other thing is I don't think there's anything truly about our culture that would in any way, shape, or form say that we want to, and let me just talk about manana a little bit because I wouldn't have brought that up, but they brought him up. Manana is the thing about, do we want to have the hustle and bustle of uh of New York City or of London or of Tokyo? No, we don't probably want it, and we will never have it.
No.
That's a throwaway. Don't worry about that. We're going to be fine. And just because you're not in a place that has that level of hustle and bustle doesn't mean you can't have a good economy. It doesn't mean you can't have good schools, and doesn't mean you can't have low crime. It doesn't mean you can't have a decent healthcare system. The things that really make having a family, living with your family in New Mexico, and heaven forbid, having opportunities for that next generation to stay and live and work here. Because, all those things that Wallet Hub reports on, being bad in those does not help anyone.
Yeah, I want to specifically address some of the family aspects of this, because I do think that that is something that people who defend New Mexico against critiques will say, oh, it's just the manana aspect, but also the family aspect. Now, I'm a believer that having, and I'm not saying moms shouldn't stay home with their children and help raise them, and that shouldn't be a top priority. Ironically, of course, right now we're in the midst of this free childcare expansion. So ultimately, the governor, and I'm sure Javier will be right there leading the cheer and shepherding this bill through the House if he can get it done. Uh, that is removing parents from the equation. That is eliminating or mitigating against stay at home parenting, presumably by the mom, could be the dad. Uh, on the flip side, let's talk about Utah as an example. Utah is a state for some obvious religious reasons, but obviously cultural reasons as well, that is widely considered an excellent place to raise a family. Oh, let's go to Wallet Hub again. I'm going to try to just keep hammering Wallet Hub away on this because I think they do a lot of very good reports. Now, Utah was only ranked 20th in the latest Wallet Hub best and worst states to raise a family 2025. And part of that is, I'm sure, because family fun ranking probably isn't as high in Utah. But, again, it's a good report. They have health and safety, health and safety, education and childcare, affordability, socioeconomics. Yet again, New Mexico, dead last in this report. Now, Utah, I know this is going to shock you, Wally, but Utah has one of the highest workforce participation rates in the entire country. To my knowledge, well, no other state besides New Mexico has even considered the idea of universal free childcare. I don't know that they have a up to 400% childcare. In fact, I will make the bold statement that there are probably a very high percentage of people married, husband and wife together in the state of Utah, raising their children, and yet their workforce participation rate is in excess of 70%. We're at 57.4% here in New Mexico. Now, if this was driven in New Mexico by a bunch of moms and dads relying on the other partner in a stable, unified marriage in order to raise the child, and that they just, for whatever reason, didn't enter the workforce at a later date, I would say, okay, well, that's sensible. That makes sense. Is there anybody within the sound of my voice that thinks that is an accurate statement? No. We have a lot of divorces and unwed moms in New Mexico. We have a lot of people who are at home getting welfare checks. None of this is good for the soul and good for happiness and good for our culture at all.
No, Paul, I totally agree with that. And then the other aspect about it's interesting that, and they obviously didn't think this through very much when they were putting these social media posts together. But the historic culture of New Mexico is extremely hardworking because this was a tough place to live.
Sure.
And if you weren't extremely hardworking, you probably were not going to survive. And so to put out, I don't even think it's a culture, this weird, almost insulting stereotype of manana as being the core of the culture. I don't know. That just strikes me as a bridge too far because, as you say, what are the things that improve family are? Can you do it too much? Absolutely. If you work 100 hours a week and you're never home, that is not ideal for parents. That's not an ideal family situation. But by the same token, not having a job is not shown in any culture, much less New Mexico culture, to be the path to success for a successful family, having a positive impact in your children's lives for the next generation.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that when it comes to work, there is a balancing act to be had there. It's impossible to say exactly what that amount is, but I think it's safe to say that more people in New Mexico should be in the workforce, certainly a higher percentage. Uh, what hours they work, I think varies very widely by family need. Certainly, if you are a single, a father or a mother, and the other adult is staying at home and taking care of the kids and their small kids, you may be working considerably more hours than somebody whose kids are all gone and you're still married to your spouse and you've been saving money throughout the years, etc. Um, I can only do what I need to do, though, Wally, which is to yet again rely on our friends at Wallet Hub. Our hardest working states in America 2025 index. Now, this one's a little different because for a change, New Mexico is not considered at the very bottom of the hardest working states index. We are just 43rd. And there's a array of states, and you can argue, and I haven't dived into this as to whether it's all 100% effective or not, or accurate or not, but we'll just go with the bottom 10 and see what what pattern, if any, emerges. So Oregon, 41st. Illinois, 42nd. Now, you think of Chicago, you think big city, very high cost of living. That's got to be a place where people work really hard. But of course, there's also, uh, it's a blue state with generous welfare benefits. Anyway, Illinois, New Mexico, Ohio, my home state, which has its share of socioeconomic problems, but certainly also has plenty of big cities: Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo, etc. California, say what you will about them. New York, Nevada. Apparently, everybody's not just at the casinos all day eating the early bird breakfast, lunch, but Rhode Island, West Virginia, and Michigan. I don't really see a specific pattern there, and I think this may be a report that has less relevancy. For the record, Utah is ranked 24th, even though they have a very high workforce participation rate. So maybe this isn't the most relevant information because, again, I think that the sweet spot for most people is probably working a 40-hour week and having enough vacation time to enjoy the world around them. For retirees, obviously, if you save enough money, you can retire very early. But retiring very early, if you have been suckling from the government teat and piling up a fancy pension, that's not great for the rest of the state. You want that kind of thing to be accessible and for average people. New Mexico, we are very skewed towards government being big, fat, and happy, where the private sector kind of struggles to scrape by. So a lot of different factors when it comes to work, but love for your thoughts.
Well, Paul, if you look at work and what drives high wages, and it's basically efficiency, usually capital, so another way of saying is if you're in the lowest of a service type of job with no technology, no capital involved of any kind, that's probably not too high paying a job. But as if your economy develops, the jobs that have good wages at 40 hours a week, plus vacation, plus benefits, are things that are a little bit up the economic scale, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be high level services, something like software development, things that are above and beyond, just the basic services of, being a janitor or doing something like that, being a low skilled maintenance type of employee. And so, the point of all of that is that, and not just in New Mexico, worldwide, what raises rates of pay is labor productivity, and what raises labor productivity is capital, and what raises capital is good business environment and good workforce, and those things all work together. And so, are any of those anti-family? I would argue not at all.
Well, yeah, you're going to be working a lot harder in a world that's lacking significant capital. If you are engaged in, I guess Mr. Jojola, Javier Martinez would be of the ilk that would, kind of say, oh, that the traditional practices of farming and agriculture in New Mexico, those are the ideal. That's what we need to be shooting for. Of course, they will be the first ones to then criticize the pecan farmers down in Las Cruces or the dairy industry in the eastern part of New Mexico, because those are industrial farms using all the water, this, that, and the other. Well, I'm not here to defend every aspect of those models, but I will say that they are the ones that are proven to be economically successful and competitive, not just here in New Mexico, but on an international basis. And the green chili farmers as well. And yes, who doesn't love this time of year the smell of green chilies? But of course, we're struggling with the loss of that industry for a variety of reasons as well. Now, you mentioned capital, and of course, capital and capitalism is based on the idea that a capitalist saves up money and resources and then invests in the plow or the new technology in the factory that boosts productivity. And that is how you ultimately uh, bring wealth and increase living standards to society. But one ingredient, Wally, that you didn't mention, and it just dovetails so perfectly. It's like I told you to say this: education.
Oh, yeah.
So we all know, and it's not just Wallet Hub, but Wallet Hub is one of those many lists. And I think this is the one that really kills me, quite frankly, every single day of my life, to hear people like Speaker Martinez and Jeremy Hohola say, oh, this is everything's hunky-dory in New Mexico, these traditional ways of life, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let's pull apart education. And of course, education is a contributor to a capitalistic enterprise, and it's not necessarily just a major in college in women's studies or basket weaving or whatever. We're talking about reading, writing, and arithmetic, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a college diploma, but in some aspects of our economy, you do need that. Medical field being one challenged area of our economy where we need that. So the education system in New Mexico has proven to be an abject failure. And this may get into sensitive territory here, but obviously there are people in New Mexico who I have talked to for the 20 years that I've lived here who say, well, New Mexico's never going to thrive, never going to perform well on educational reports among U.S. states. In fact, this is basically the argument of the Voices for Children when the NAEP scores came out as, again, being dead last. Can New Mexico, can the culture of New Mexico thrive and grow at an educational way, in educational statistics and numbers that is relevant to improving not only the economy, but the livelihoods of everyday New Mexicans? I think that is a true question.
And the answer is absolutely, positively yes.
I agree. If Mississippi can do it, we can do it.
Well, and you know what? It's like, wow. So now, do we need to make some policy changes to improve our education system to do that? Absolutely. But Paul, what's the flip side of that? What if you say no to that? Then you're just saying, are New Mexicans inherently not smart people with no ability to learn? And I absolutely say that that's false. So it's one of those things. Can we? Absolutely, we can. There are proven things we can do. We can start making progress. Heck, in the special session, if we choose to, or the next legislative session, if we choose to, or the one after that, if we choose to. Now, will we, or will we be content? And are we going to switch from even caring about education to just saying it doesn't matter? Man, I hope not. For the sake, and you know what? a lot of people say this is for the children. It's just, it's for me and I'm using the children.
Oh,
Hey,
absolutely.
this is for, getting getting educational achievement among a larger percentage of the children in New Mexico is absolutely critical. And to do otherwise is I think bordering, and I think maybe across the border on criminal. So yeah, so if we don't care enough to do what it takes to improve education, then we won't. But we certainly can as a state. We have everything we need to do it.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And I will simply read the remarks of Emily Wildow. She is the Kids Count Coordinator at New Mexico Voices for Children. Uh, so she says New Mexico's ranking in the education domain, which is 52nd across the board, losing out to Washington, D.C., DOD schools, and all other 50 states or 49 states. So New Mexico's ranking in the education domain is heavily impacted by national standardized test scores, including fourth grade reading proficiency. Reading proficiency is critical for students to succeed academically and as adults. These scores do not reflect the ability of our children, but rather an education system that is not designed with our multicultural, multilingual students in mind. New Mexico K 12 students of color and those who are Native American from low income families and who have disabilities tend to not fare as well as their white, more affluent peers, largely as a result of generations of underfunding the education system and lack of culturally responsive instruction and support. So I am going to say that we can lump Emily Wildow in with the Javier Martinez, Jeremy Hohola mentality, uh, because clearly New Mexico kids, no matter their color or cultural background, can learn if you have a system that uh, that works. And yeah, maybe you need to teach a different way in some areas of New Mexico. But they've only had, it's not like this problem suddenly snuck up on New Mexico at some point recently. And we realized that, holy cow, we've got different ethnic populations of students here in New Mexico. How do we teach them? Well, uh, figure it out. We're spending enough money on this system that we should be able to do what needs to be done to educate these and other kids. Are they necessarily going to perform at the same levels as kids in Massachusetts or New York? Maybe not. But certainly Mississippi should be, and that's why we use that as an example, because not only is it a state that has markedly improved its educational outcomes, but it's a state that suffers from many of the similar. No state has exactly the same culture as New Mexico. No state, period. Uh, Mississippi, though, has many of the same cultural challenges. And for policymakers to simply say, "Oh, we just culturally, ethnically, we can't get the job done and compete with our other states." And as you say, 25th at this point for a lot of these needs to be the goal. And if we get to 25th, then we can talk about ways that we can move up the ladder fully. Mississippi, by the way, 16th in education. So it can be done. But again, Javier Martinez is the self-interested party here. I would also say that Emily Wildow and the Kids Count and Voices for Children, because they support the progressive left-wing agenda, regardless of outcomes. And yet again, this is the case. And just saying, oh, we can't do it. Our culture is not geared towards it, et cetera, is a complete and total cop-out. And it allows Javier Martinez and, broadly speaking, the Democratic Party, not just, now it's really the progressives, but anybody of that mindset, including some Republicans, I would say, but certainly most Democrats, because they have been in power for so long, they play on these cultural factors in order to retain power, and it is killing our state.
Paul, when I was in Leadership New Mexico, we saw several presentations about education, and I actually developed some opinions, heaven forbid, about what it would take in New Mexico and what are the key drivers of educational success. And the first two might surprise some people, but I think number one is positive expectations, which means uh, truly believing that our students can learn and get and achieve high educational goals. And then the second is high standards. So, not dumbing things down, actually keeping the standards and measuring where we are. And then the third is then implement those effective education strategies. So if you have the best education approach and everybody thinks that these students that are in the classroom are can't be taught and will never succeed. You know, there is a huge self-fulfilling prophecy in that. And so there's even studies that were done that back in the days when it was a little easier to get sociology studies done about, they would tell teachers, uh, they would just randomly tell teachers, this is the half of your students that are good students, and these are the half that are poor students. And sure enough, they would teach in such a way that the students they thought were the good students would do better. You know, heck, what happens if you think that every one of your students is a good student and teach that way? So, but what's interesting is that particular factor is the exact opposite of what we're reading in here. We'd rather have excuses than expectations for success. Because why, I don't know. And I would argue that's not our culture. That's not our culture. That's this weird political anomaly. You know, doing poorly is nothing about the culture of New Mexico.
Well, I'm going to leave this on a positive note, and I'm going to read another passage from you in the comment section under this post from none other than Steve Stucker,
Okay.
KOB4, who I've always admired and really not only just admired from a personal perspective, but from a kind of a subterranean political angle because I know where Steve kind of is coming from, although for years and years he kept that under his hat because of his job as a meteorologist. Of course, he at some point worked with Jeremy Hohola, but this is a response that in many ways summarizes, I think, our views. So Steve says, I've always admired you, of course, speaking about Jeremy Hohola, cheered for your career, and you moved away long ago because, question mark, I understand. 3 of my 4 beloved children left for better job opportunities. That hurt deeply. I'm not native and am sometimes criticized for speaking out, as if my 42 years of deeply devoted service and commitment here don't count because I was born elsewhere. I can agree wholeheartedly with you on many of the wonderful things you highlight. I love this state and our culture with all my soul, yet my heart breaks over the ongoing problems like generational poverty and addiction that is constantly blamed on outsiders, on the crime that is horrific and growing, but somehow someone else's fault, on the terrible substandard educational ratings. I agree we can blow off media hyped lists that mean nothing, but when we are dead last in every professional measurement of our kids knowing basics like math and reading, leaning back on the tired old ideas that at least we have culture doesn't cut it. We insist on re-electing the same groups of leaders for over 60 years and wonder why nothing gets better. I love it here too. Unlike the vast majority of my chosen profession, I deliberately decided to stay when I had opportunities elsewhere, to swim against the current and attempt to make a difference. I often feel I'm a failure, but keep trying. Yes, let's celebrate the very special qualities here, but please don't paint a romantic picture that makes it sound as if nothing should change, that all is well, especially when you've been gone so long. We can maintain our goodness and still create a safe environment where there are ways for our children and grandchildren to build a good life, where it's safe to walk downtown, where we can see a doctor without waiting 7 months, where life is the way it could and should be for those willing to work for it. We can, but will we choose to? So, very well said, Mr. Stucker. He's another one that, Steve, if you happen to listen to this show, or if I see you or talk to you again, I've seen him around town many times. I would love to have you on and talk more. With that, I'll just leave it there and say thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.